So the first question is, and we're just going to take this one by one, about 2 minutes each. If you can, give us an overview of your current role and career path. So what do you do and how did you get there? If you used to work in the medical field, what did you do and how did you get there? Okay, and we'll just start this way and head that way, and then of course in the future we'll start that way and head this way.
Hey guys, I'm Laura DeMoli. I'm an infectious disease doc over at University of Colorado Anschutz campus, and I treat primarily bone and joint infections for a living, but also any other kind of weird infectious disease, chronic fever, don't know what's wrong with you. If you've seen this show House, I know I'm like aging myself, but it's a lot of kind of what gets sent to us is similar. I'm originally from Georgia, and I see someone cheering in the background. So I grew up there, did high school, kind of thought this is where I would head, but wasn't sure. Went to college at Tulane down in New Orleans, and was a collegiate EMT, emergency medical technician. Fell in love with medicine, applied to med school, went back to Georgia, it actually took me 5 years to get through med school for various personal reasons, but it's supposed to take 4. And then from there, I did a residency in internal medicine for 3 years, and then a fellowship in infectious disease for 2 more years. So it's a long time. I'm not really sure how long that was, but a long time. 4, 5, 9, plus 5, 14 years of training. But you are a doctor during the latter 5 years. And then I've been what we call an attending, which is kind of like I'm in charge of people on my service. So if I'm on inpatient service, I might have students, I might have residents, because I'm in an academic space. And I've been doing that for 7 years now, and really enjoy it. So if anyone is interested, I hope you ask me some questions.
That's great.
All right, perfect.
Hi everyone. I think you guys all know who I am. So I'll tell you how I got here. So back a long time ago, when I was 13, I started in long-term care facilities. So I worked in nursing homes. Surprise. I started as an activity assistant, moved into kind of the CNA world, then moved out of the CNA world, went and got my medical assistant degree. So I didn't have the medical assistant degree, although I've only used it for about 3 months before I went into the business end of a private practice. From there, I hopped quite a bit through the private practice sector in different roles in the business office within 2 different practices. So I've done everything from front office receptionist to middle office billing, was an office manager for private practice. Then I decided that it was time to give up the medical field and went to work at Target, which most of you guys already knew. I worked at Target in HR, and now I'm here. So doing all the fun things I do here. That's me in a nutshell.
Hi, I'm Carmen. I started when I was 18 as a caregiver at an assisted living home. And then a couple years into that, I decided to get my CNA because you cannot work at a nursing home without your CNA. So then I did that, and then I got my QMAP, which is where you can pass out medications in an adult day facility or an assisted living home in the state of Colorado.
Carmen, will you tell them what CNA is?
Yeah, certified nursing assistant. It's basically where you help patients with their ADLs, which is activities of daily living. So you shower them, dress them, bathe them, feed them, basically do all like activities for the patients that can't take care of themselves. And I've worked in assisted livings, nursing homes, hospitals, adult day facilities. And then COVID hit and it kind of scared me a little bit, so I went to school for healthcare administration. And I worked in an orthopedic practice doing that for a little while. And I'm currently back in school going for my medical assistant certificate. And that is basically when you go to the doctor and you present
see a lot of different places, work with a lot of different people. Yeah, so that's basically, I went to school for 4 years, so I have my bachelor's degree. It's definitely a wonderful career path to choose to take it.
Alright. I'm Tyler. I'm a firefighter paramedic for the city of Aurora. I work on Engine 2, which happens to be the busiest paramedic engine company in the state of Colorado and the 7th busiest in the United States, so I run a lot of calls. We do pre-hospital emergency medicine as well as firefighting. See, I've been a paramedic for 8 years. Before that, I was an emergency technician basic for 12 years. The career path to get into that is pretty much you need to finish high school, and then from there you can usually go into like an EMT basic course that takes a semester, or there are some agencies that will hire you right out of high school. Like if you were apply for the Aurora Fire Department, you don't have to have any certification or any prior experience to do that. You got to be 18. You got to have a driver's license and a high school diploma, and that's all you need to apply. And then after being an EMT for a couple of years, you can apply to paramedic school, and there's all sorts of different programs for that. And that program takes about 1.5 years to become a paramedic. And then you need to go work on the street. If you get a paramedic license, you can pretty much get a job just about anywhere you want anymore. There's a lot of vacancies for pre-hospital emergency medicine, where as an EMT or as a paramedic, so there's a lot of opportunity there for you.
My name is Jason Minitillo. I'm a sterile processing technician by trade, but now a sterile processing director. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I sit on the backside of ORs. Those of you who have seen like Grey's Anatomy, House MD, when they say scalpel, and the doctor says, scalpel, all those surgical tools are what my team reprocesses so that you're able to actually have a good, clean, successful surgery. If you go to the ED, break your arm, wrist, whatever, anything that they use to reset, I touch the process. So if you're going to get a scope, my team reprocesses. I got involved when I was 19 years of age, so just right outside of high school, and just climbed the corporate ladder, career path. Nice thing is all you need to do is be able to be graduated. A lot of the training that we do is on-the-job training, and it ends up being certification-led. There's a big, giant certification push right now in my world because we are so short-staffed in terms of sterile processing. So you can go into hospitals, you can go into clinics, you can go into small ambulatory surgery centers, GI labs, dental. So there's tons of opportunity in that regard. Yeah, that's about it. How I got into it is I have a background in the family that is an emergency room nurse, and she said, "Man, you're really good at all of the medical stuff, and medical jargon, and you don't cringe at blood, guts, and gore. Why don't you go ahead and get involved in the medical world?" So I said, "That's cool." Plus, I was going to med school, pre-med. I actually got accepted to med school. I do have a bachelor's degree, and then another 2 years. That's just to continue on with this. So, but yeah, like I said, straight out of high school, you can join into both.
What suggestions do you have for students looking to get into medical fields? Is there anything you would do differently from the way that you did it? And anything you think you did right that you would recommend?
You're right now at the good opening stages of getting into the medical field. You know people here on this panel, either first, secondary, or tertiary. Ask them questions. They actually have a leg up, so if you're a good communicator, you're able to talk with us. I'm sure that that leads to further, we'll say, introductions into the space. That's what I would say is the best thing you can do is ask questions, get to know what you're looking to get into, and then from there, move forward. In terms of what I did right, that's exactly what I did. I chased my mother, who was an emergency room nurse, and said, "How do I get into the medical field?" In terms of what I would do better, I would went ahead and say, I would have pursued harder on
actually echo some of the stuff that Jason said. One of the things that you can do if you're wanting to get into pre-hospital medicine is a lot of places offer what they call ride-alongs, where you can come and you can spend some time with the company or with that agency and observe on calls, and you can kind of get a taste and see if you're into something like that. There's also volunteer opportunities. There's certain agencies where they don't have the budget to pay their personnel, so you could volunteer there and you get some good exposure and run some calls and get some training through there. That's a really great way to do it. Some of the best advice that I could give to all you young people is stay out of trouble. The number one thing that can delay your career is making silly mistakes when you're young. You know, we get it. You're young. You're trying new stuff. And you're going to make mistakes. But if you're interested in this kind of field, I would encourage you to try to pull back from some of that stuff a little bit, because a silly mistake that you can make while you're young can really affect your ability to get into this career and change things for a very long term. Yeah, and just stuff that I think I did right. Like, I started out as a volunteer. I went to community college and got some of my certifications so that I was a little bit prepared. So when I was actually hired, I still had to go through all that stuff again, but I was more prepared and more successful.
And to piggyback off of what you said about volunteering, so nowadays to get into nursing school, it's not as easy as it used to. They really look at what you have to offer, and what they want to see is, do you have volunteer experience? Are you going to take the program seriously? So I would advise anybody who wants to get into a nursing program to obtain your CNA, to volunteer, to really put some
However, medical may not be for you. So don't force it if it's not meant for you and you're not enjoying it. It's time to probably get away and get away from it. You can only do justice to your patients if you guys are invested in the medical field.
I have so many suggestions if you want to be a doctor or a provider, but to keep it short, I would piggyback off of a few things. One, if you want to be a provider, you have to have a completely clean criminal record or no one will give you a state license. So just FYI. But getting through medical school is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm talking 12, I still sometimes work 12-hour days, and I'm not trying to scare you, but up all night studying for days on end and so hard. So what I'm trying to get at is that it needs to be, by the time you get to medical school, like I really can't see myself doing anything else. Because otherwise you won't make it through. Because you need that passion and something pushing you to say, you know what, if I dropped out, I don't know what I would do. And things that you can do now is ask doctors if you can shadow them. You can reach out to medical school, like their or hospital, their education sections. They all have like education departments, and ask like how you can get involved in shadowing, come see what being a doctor's like, see if it is for you. You may not like it, and you may want to be a paramedic, you may want to do sterile processing, nursing, all these other things, like be on the business side. Those are all cool too. So I'm now actually a really good test taker, and I teach it to other people, but going through for like half of the time, I was terrible. I couldn't take, oh my gosh, you look at the test, you're like, A is right, but B is a good option. And then I picked B. And so I didn't always have the best test scores. So you had to have, don't give up if this is what you want. You can get a C and still make it through. I got C's in Orgo, otherwise I had basically straight A's through all of college. So you can still make it, and you just have to keep going and pushing and have that passion. And we can talk about college, but you need a 4-year school, really not community college. You need to have an incredibly impressive application, and you need some volunteer experience ahead of time to get into school. Consider APPs like nurse practitioner, PA. You get to do a lot of the same things with a lot less work to get there. And yeah, I think I did it right to get there because I just didn't give up, and now I'm really happy for it.
The question is, as a teenager, did you already know this arena or role is where you would end up? And at teenager, think about like 16. So when you were 16, did you know that this role or arena is where you would end up? If you're a yes, will you raise your hand? Interesting. Okay. Jason, will you elaborate on your no?
Absolutely. So I was going to school for marine biology, actually. So I was pre-med listed with a specialty in evolutionary biology at the Metro State University. And about 2 years in, I realized I am not going to do marine biology in a landlocked state. I didn't want to spend buku bucks because I was paying for my own college. And so I was just starting in this career and realized, I could get reimbursement, tuition reimbursement if I stayed in the medical field. Just started pursuing that. And when I got into med school, I got accepted and a month later declined, mainly because I had a little kiddo come into my life and decided that that was more of my passion, to be a dad and not be tied up as a doctor. That was just my choice, but it was the best thing I did in that sense. But I still stayed in the medical field because I knew that there was an absolute opportunity. And what I learned in sterile processing is nobody knew how to do it really well, so if I could just do it better than everybody else, I was going to be fine. A little cocky, sorry.
It's actually relatively unusual that folks know that early. Many of you do, which is impressive, but a whole lot of folks don't. So my question is, if you're 16 and you're trying to figure out, like, who the heck am I? And what do I actually want to do? How did you know that? How did you figure it out? And you don't all have to answer. Just if you would raise your hand.
I just went based off of a feeling. I had my first job as a trade passer at a hospital, so I would take patients their trays. And one day I had seen, I walked into a patient's room, he looked sweaty and terrible, and it looked like he just really didn't feel good. And I got back to what my mom would have done in those scenarios for me, and she used to pick mint leaves from our So I asked him, I said, are you nauseous? And he said, yes. And I said, would you like some mint tea? So I made a special trip down to the cafeteria to get him some mint tea, took it up to him. And then for lunch, I passed his tray and I noticed he ordered that same mint tea for lunch. And in my 16-year-old mind, I thought, oh my gosh, I made somebody feel better. And I loved that feeling. So for me, it truly was a calling to me. I wanted to help and I wanted to make people feel better.
Callie, you want that to Laura?
Sure. So, for me, it started out as actually a very little kid. There was a lot of firefighters in my family, a lot of firefighters in my community and stuff like that. And like most little kids, I liked fire trucks, and I happened to be one that just never grew out of it. But also, there were just many points in my life where I got to either be on the receiving end or witness that pre-hospital care and just how impactful it was for people to have somebody showing up and treating them like family and making everything okay again. So that always just really resonated with me, and I always really looked up to those people. So once I got to be 16, 17, and I actually got to make a choice on like what path I was going to go down, I was like, this is an option, and I want to do that. So yeah, that was.
So I'm like the stereotypical kid who was in high school and people are like, okay, you're kind of the smart kid, like not to be obnoxious. So you're either going to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? Like those are your options. I don't know if that's still kind of the thing. And so I was like, well, which one do I want to do? And I still, to this day, I'm like, should I have been a lawyer? Because I still like some of that, but I really loved biology and anatomy, and the more I saw about that, the more I liked it. So I went to college and just kind of kept going down that path. I did some medical mission work in high school, which really helped confirm what I wanted to do. And I also volunteered in a hospital, like taking equipment to rooms and to nurses, where I just got to kind of see the flow. And I don't know, if you try to apply to med school, the answer is never I want to help people. But in the real world, that is the answer, right? Like you want to help people, and when you help somebody, you feel good. And so there's lots of ways to do it, but I was kind of ignorant at the time and didn't know all the different ways that I could help somebody. So it's just where I ended up.
I had a freshman come, who's I just scanned, is not in the room right now, come to see me last week, and she said, okay, in my family, my options are to be a judge or a surgeon. So same thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it's still the thing.
Michelle and Carmen, do y'all have anything to add to this? A no is okay? Okay.
When I was little, I used to always go to my grandparents' house, and I would always help them with their laundry, and I cleaned their whole house for them every single weekend. And it just made me feel better going back home every week that I was helping them and making them smile. And so when I, got older, I was like, I want to do something that helps people and makes people feel good. So naturally, I became a CNA.
So the next question is, what is the best and worst thing about your particular role and or past medical roles you've had? So if you had a medical role that was like, that sucked, you should tell us why, or that was particularly fun, whatever. So best and worst thing about current past roles. Let's start with Rhiannon and move that way.
Okay. So I feel like the best thing about my role as a registered nurse, there's so many areas of nursing that you can go into. Bedside nursing, you can become a forensic nurse, you can do administration, you can get into the IT side of things. You can move all around. If you get bored in one area, you can get trained in another. And that was advice that a physician gave me. He told me he was going to plan my life out. I was going to be a nurse because if I got tired of one area, I could move around and I had options. That is the best thing I think about nursing. There's just so many areas you can adventure to. The worst thing about the particular role, I think sometimes caregiving can be exhausting. It can be, there's a lot of politics involved, depending on where you're at, and the politics go up and down. There's good places and bad places, and good times and bad times. But I think that's probably the most exhausting part. Is sometimes you get other nurses who are burnt out or exhausted or are in the field for the wrong reason. So you want to make sure that if you do become a nurse, that you're doing it for all the right reasons, to help people and not for money. If you do it for money, you won't need it.
Well, I have a couple of things that I would say are best things, but probably my number one best thing would be I get to work as a part of a team, and when we do the things that we do, that group that I work with, they're another family to me. So we have holidays together. We work 24-hour shifts. We live at the firehouse together. And you grow really close with those people. So not only do you have this really awesome group that you get to go out in the field and work with, but you also get this other group that becomes a part of your family, and that's awesome. And that camaraderie is awesome. Also, I'm an adrenaline junkie, and the things that I get to do for the most part are generally pretty like chaotic or hectic, and for us, exciting. So you get that little adrenaline fix on that kind of stuff. And then some of these best and worst things they're the best and the worst, right? So we get to go to and intervene in some pretty wild situations, and a lot of times we can fix some of those things and we can bring things back to normal. But also sometimes we can't. And we go and we do our absolute best, and there's just nothing that we can do. And that affects you. It changes you. You look at things a little bit different. And that's when you gotta rely on that community that you get to work with. And the same thing, like has been said, some things are very political and they're very complicated. So it's a cool thing, right? You get these complicated situations that you get to solve, but also they're really complicated, and nobody's perfect. We make mistakes, and sometimes you're held to account for those mistakes, and that's a really big commitment and a really big sacrifice to put yourself out there to be in that position to do those things.
So I will echo, I think, what you guys said as well. If you're in the medical field, you're part of a team that, first off, has strong empathy, meaning that we care, and really, really care. We want to see the best for everybody, and sometimes we don't get that. And so there are situations where a result didn't go the way you wanted it to. I am not on the front line in terms of I am touching a patient, but my tools, my processes can lead to infections, can lead to death, can lead if it's not done correctly. So it's absolutely being a part of that team. To his point, I'm also an adrenaline junkie, and that's where I get to go into surgeries and answer to doctors and have conversations with doctors. So that's the best part of what I do. Every day I get to go in and say I touched over 35 patients because or more, depending on the amount of surgeries, and make sure that they have the best outcomes, period. I do that with a team of nurses, team of doctors, team of anesthesiologists, and yes, because of that empathy, we all want it done exactly our own way. So think about it, you guys are in your group projects, you've done that, and how many times have you said this is the way it's supposed to be done, and the next person to you, to your left or your right, is saying, no, it's got to be done this way. You have to learn how to massage that, walk that through, and that's probably the worst part of it, right? Is I know I'm supposed to do it this way, but unfortunately it's not always my way or the highway. It is our way, and that's what it is.
The best thing about being a CNA is probably making your patients smile, knowing you made a difference in one person's life that day. The worst part is probably it's very physically demanding. You're constantly lifting people, bending, twisting. It takes a toll on your body after a while. And then with medical
thing is why I'm here as well as in the medical field. It was because I was able to build connection with patients, with residents, with families. It didn't matter. I was building connections with people and really getting to know them, same as I do with you guys, my ambassadors, probably more so, but definitely getting to know all of you is playing a role into what I did out there, and really means a lot, regardless of where I'm at. So medical, it was the patients, the residents, daily taking care of them. You learn so much about them, learn about their family lives. On the flip side, then you got the families. Sure, we can all attest to the families of our patients that don't really understand. So that's probably the hardest part. I wouldn't say it's the worst part. Definitely billing and dealing with patients that don't want to pay their bills is by far the worst. Because they really just don't understand. But yeah, dealing with that family side is also a challenge that you guys are going to have to figure out how to maneuver through. It's not a yes or no. It's not an easy thing to finesse both sides. Make sure everybody's happy.
So many awesome parts. I really loved being an EMT, by the way. So that's an awesome avenue to go down. We can talk about why I did or didn't. My husband did. He went to paramedicine. Now he's a nurse. So like, there's so many things to do. The coolest thing I do is when someone comes to me and is like, I've been sick for 5 years and no one can figure out why. I run a bunch of tests. I diagnose them. I treat them and they get better. Like there's no question that's the coolest thing I do. Or is it the coolest thing I do when someone's dying in the ICU and I accomplish the same thing? And I can say, hey, I actually did that. Or my team, because it's not just me, right? It's this whole team accomplished that. But the intellectual piece of sitting there and thinking it through is, I think, the coolest thing that I do. The worst part is when you feel like you participated in a patient's bad outcome or death. Every doctor carries with them some patients that died that will keep you up at night. We don't talk about it a lot, but it's true. Families are difficult to deal with. But I'm also part of a big team that helps me out. And not just this team, but the infectious disease team. I have an orthopedic infectious disease team that I run. You know, I have nurses that I'm friends with. I have all kinds of people that are there. And they support you. And then I think also you probably gathered, but there's a lot of pressure and liability to not screw up. And to not be human and not make a mistake. And you get there. Like, don't be scared of that. Because that's why you train for so long. And I forgot to mention I also have a master's degree, so there's an extra year in there. So there's a reason you go to school for forever. Is because by the time you're in charge, you're like, oh, I know how to do this. Except for the first day. First thing I got asked on my first day as an attending was how to treat a UTI, and I was like, oh my God. Like I like this, oh my gosh. Like there's no one standing behind me to make sure I don't screw this up.
Will you tell them what that means?
A urinary tract infection, which is like the most simple thing that someone could ask me about. And I about had a panic attack because there was no one standing behind me anymore to make sure I didn't screw it up. And there had been for so many years. And then I took a deep breath and did it, and I made the good decision. Patient got better. And that took about, I'm not gonna lie, it takes about 3 months being an attending before you finally settle in and are like, hey, I know how to do this. All right, let's go. And then you feel pretty good about it. But if you don't know, I love academia because there's always people around that I can run a case by. I can talk about like what you think could be going on. Should I be doing a different test? So that's why I love, those are all the reasons that I love and hate what I do.
Say that. So if you would all share how expensive is schooling for what you have ended up doing, and what is the time commitment for training? And I love the variety that is represented here. I think that's really helpful. And start wherever you want, whoever wants to dig it. Go ahead, Jason.
I'll go first. So again, you just have to graduate high school and get hired on as a non-certified sterile processing tech. From there, you are educated most hospitals will put you through an education program that's paid for by the hospital. So your certification is either you pay it first and it's reimbursed. Testing is $160. Training is usually 14 weeks, and that kind of gets you on the ball, and you will continue to go from there. There's multiple certifications after that. If you do that while you're congruently going to college, for instance, a lot of hospitals will do tuition reimbursement. So that's actually how I paid for my school outright, is I worked full-time, went to school full-time, and got tuition reimbursement. So I have no student debt as of graduating college nearly 16 years ago.
The cost. Okay.
Cost and time commitment.
Cost and time. So there's a couple of different paths you can go down. So if you're just doing the training yourself, so I went to community college on my own initially to get my EMT basic. And that's just regular college tuition. EMT basic is a semester. So that's probably running you around like $4,000-ish for a class. I mean, it's a full load class. I think it's a 12 credit class for EMT basic. So we're running a couple $1,000s. You need to, maybe not quite as much as my physician friend here, but it is a pretty substantial amount of studying, and even something that I was unfamiliar with. And as I got started in the course, I thought I was doing pretty good, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, because I needed to learn how to study. So, it's a little different for everybody in that time commitment. And then usually most paramedic programs, they do sometimes let people what they call go zero to hero. So they get their EMT basic and then go right to paramedic school. I very much do not recommend that. The most important part of being a paramedic is being a good EMT, because those are all the fundamental things. I would probably say for any healthcare provider is the basic skills of assessment and some documentation and some basic life-saving care. Those are all the fundamentals that you will always build everything else on. So if you want to get in this field, I would say get your EMT, whether it's through an agency that would hire you and pay for that training, or you would seek out yourself and then find a job, and there are tons of them. If anybody has an EMT cert and wants to work for Falcon Ambulance, I bet you can start tomorrow. But usually about 3 years in a decently busy system, getting some experience it's about that point where like you finish school and you feel pretty good, and you start running calls, you realize you have no idea what you're doing, and then you start your way back up of learning as you're out there, and then you start hitting your stride, getting competent. So that takes about 3 years, and then you go to paramedic school. And paramedic school is 3 semesters at a minimum. It's 2 didactic semesters, so just learning all the stuff, and then you have at least a semester of clinical experience for us, but it ends up being about 500 hours or 750 hours or something between clinical, hospital, and field experience. So that's about a $12,000 course if you pay for it on your own. And then the same thing, you're going to get out there and you're going to feel like you know everything, and then you're going to realize you don't, and then you're going to start getting your way back up, and then you'll feel pretty good. So really, to be a paramedic, it's probably about a 4 to 5 year journey to getting that done.
For nursing, for the bachelor's degree that I have, I actually started out in a 2-year program. I don't remember the class. I think back then, I think it really was probably like $10,000, which I don't know what that would add up to these days. And then the hospital that I work for actually paid for me to get my bachelor's. So I think a total of 4 years is what it took me all in all to get my bachelor's degree.
Healthcare administration, I did that through a technical college, and that takes about 8 months, and it cost me about $12,000. And then medical assisting, that's about 10, 11 months, and that
I got my business administration degree first. That was 2 years. Don't ask me how much that was because that was many, couple decades ago. So way different now. And then my medical assistant, about the same. It took me 9 months to get mine, only because I had my associate in business. But I will tell you, you're going to be a lifelong learner regardless of what part of medical you go into because it's always changing. There's laws that are changing, there's diagnoses and treatments and I'll let you talk about all of that changes. So you're going to be a lifelong learner. It's not a one and done type of thing.
You really want the answer? So I think the fastest way you could go through would be 3 years of college, which I don't really recommend, 4 years of med school, and then you would do your residency, which is typically somewhere between 3 and 9 years, depending on your specialty. And then that gets you out working. And then if you want to subspecialize, you can. So you can add that up, but most people it's 10 to 15 years of school. Cost. I did it all private with the help of my parents, thank God. But if you put it together, it came out to somewhere around $700,000. So the cheaper way to do this is to be able to go to a state school with in-state pricing, because I went to out-of-state private college. So in-state school pricing, then an in-state med school, which will be significantly cheaper. I also went to an in-state private med school, because that's what I could get into. Remember, I wasn't that awesome in tests at first. And so then I got into my top choice for residency and fellowship once I figured out how to take a test. By the way, the trick is to look at the question as how it was written, and we start with the answer when we write a test, and then we create the question. And that changed everything for me. I went, literally my scores went up. So step 1, I had a 180. This means very little to you, but just think about it. Step 2, I went to a 240. So, I mean, it's a huge difference once that changed my world. But, so, in-state college, I don't know what that costs anymore. In-state med school, that'll get you through the cheapest. And then if you sign on to work a rural tract, they'll pay you back. If you sign on for the military, they'll pay for everything. And you'll owe the military usually 3 years for your med school. So there's ways, depending on what your financial situation is. But I will tell you that I am very lucky, but most of my friends in their 40s are still paying off school loans. So, I'll reiterate, don't do this for money. I don't know what you think. Shout out, what do you think a doctor makes? Okay, good. That's I make a little bit more than that now because I've been doing it for 7 years, but that's about right. So if I'm paying off a $700,000 program, I'm in a bad situation, right? So
what was the amount they said?
I think for my school it was about $700,000.
But what did they say?
200.
Oh.
It depends on what you sign on to do. Surgeons at my hospital sign on at about $325 and are expected to double that based on how many cases they do. So they make a ton more than those of us that don't do procedures. But just don't go into it for money, please. Go be a CEO or go do something else. I can tell you we paid about $12,000 a semester for nursing school this past year. And so, since you can, and I just paid it. So, yeah.
Thank you all. A couple of details. One is that when many of these folks were in school, they were not necessarily starting college while in high school. So the fact that you all have that option, 1 class per semester, I would definitely get started if I were you. So you can go to Ames, you can go to Front Range. I'm the person to talk to about that. Many of you in here have already talked to me about that. And we're just figuring it out, right? And so with some of you, you're helping us figure that out. But I would do that. The other thing is that your generation, for the most part, is not willing to pay this much for school. It's changed. So there are very different scholarship opportunities. So most of my students within the last 5 years have not been paying that much for school. So there are other ways to do it. Workforce development, which is the same folks who will pay you all for your internships once you're 16, they also pay for training. That also did not exist when many of these folks were in school. So there are opportunities that aren't reflected. They're making it easier, which is a really, really good thing.